Hey guys, welcome to the video on stress response. If you could open up your books to the part that is talking about the adrenal glands, there is a space that says draw the diagram of stress, and that is where we're going to start. So there are two parts to the stress response loop. We are going to talk about first the fast acting stress response. Okay. Both parts of stress response start with stress triggering the hypothalamus. But in fast acting stress, or when we're like initially scared. So think of a moment where like you felt like you going up a dark staircase. We all know that one's a good one, right? Where you turn off the lights and then you bucket up the stairs as fast as you can because you're like, oh my gosh, there's something behind me, even though you know there's something not. Your heart rate gets up and you're feeling a little adrenaline pumping through you. That is fast acting stress. So how is this working? Well, hypothalamus actually sends a message directly to the spinal cord, just like a reflex arc. And that triggers our adrenal gland to release epinephrine, which then is part of our fight or flight response. Fight or flight means, do I stop and protect myself or do I run to protect myself? Okay. So fast acting stress is like that initial boom, scared. What am I going to do? Okay. We've all felt a jolt of adrenaline, a jolt of epinephrine, I guess you could say. And that is how it actually occurs. That's why it's so fast, is because it's being passed through our spinal cord. We now know how that works with a reflex arc. So this, when compared to long-term stress, is a little bit different. Our long-term stress, although again starts with the hypothalamus, instead of being past the spinal cord and being a nerve impulse, which is extremely quick, now it's being passed through the anterior pituitary and the hormone is released into the bloodstream. Because it's released into the bloodstream, it's a little bit slower acting. So the hypothalamus triggers the anterior pituitary gland to release ACTH. ACTH is a tropic hormone. It targets a specific gland, the adrenal gland. Okay. Now that the adrenal gland has been targeted, it now releases two types of hormones, cortisol and aldosterone. Cortisol is also known as a glucocorticoid. Aldosterone is known as a mineralocorticoid. We are going to focus on aldosterone later in this chapter, but I do want you to know that it is part of the stress loop, and I will explain why when we go through our notes, but we're going to focus mostly on cortisol. So in your stress part of your notes, please put this diagram down. Maybe you're a color person like I am. I would recommend doing it just to keep them separated. I would also recommend referring to this one as a nerve impulse and this one too as hormones in the blood, just as a reminder that this is fast and this is slow. In the box below, we're going to now talk about the cortisol point. But before we do, I just want to show you guys this picture. This is just a diagram that's similar to the one in your textbook. You may take a picture of this or screenshot it or whatever you can do if you want to keep it. This is just showing long-term and short-term stress in a rather than a flowchart in a picture form. So as you can see here, here's stress hitting up a nerve, sending it to the spinal cord, to the adrenal gland, and what it does. And then this is the stress to the anterior pituitary, to the adrenal gland, and what it does. Just a little bit different way to look at it. So let's take it and let's really look at the effects of glucocorticoids. So the slow-term stress response. So it starts with long-term stress. So I say to you, hey guys, by the way, next week you have an exam. I'm not going to teach you anything on the exam. Here's the pages you need to read. Hopefully you do well. I'm sure some of you would be like, oh my gosh, this is ridiculous. How am I supposed to do this? And you're going to start to stress. And that stress is going to last for a long time until you take the test, right? Long-term stress. How does it work? Well, the hypothalamus is triggered. So long-term stress, the hypothalamus picks up on it and says, you know what? We need to get the anterior pituitary involved. In order to get the anterior pituitary involved, we actually release this thing called ACTH releasing factor. You need to include this in your drawing. It will be expected on your drawing quiz. The anterior pituitary then says, okay, well, let's get some secretion of some ACTH out to the adrenal gland. So that's what's happening here. So the hormone we're focusing on here is ACTH. It is the tropic hormone. It is targeting the adrenal gland. What is it releasing? It's releasing that glucocorticoid known as cortisol. Cortisol is maybe something you recognize. People can get cortisol shots to help with pain and inflammation and stuff like that. We release it naturally. It is one of the hormones. It can, in high amounts, be quite dangerous for us. So what does it do? Well, cortisol's job is to target our liver and muscles. It targets our liver muscles to do all of this, to increase our amino acids in our blood to help with muscle recovery. It helps our liver convert glycogen into glucose. Okay, so the amino acids in there, and so we can have more energy. It controls our weight, helps us fight infections, all those kinds of things. It also deals with how stressed we are. In the mornings, your cortisol is at the highest, and it should drop throughout the day. People who are very sick, severely stressed, will notice that their cortisol levels are extremely high during the day and remain that way throughout the day, which is not good because it actually has quite a huge effect on your body. Because like we said, you're constantly converting stuff into energy. You're going to feel tired and cranky because your body can't keep up with the demand. So this long-term stress continues to happen, and cortisol will continue to be released until we return back to the state of not being stressed, which is then the negative feedback loop part. Okay, so please get this into your notes in the section that is the little box in the adrenal glands, and make sure you label it cortisol if it's not. This will be your drawing quiz along with the stress loops, so the fast and slow. So you need to know fast and slow all the way through, and then this as well. So you're going to be drawing both. Okay. Yes, it seems redundant because long-term stress is being drawn twice. Okay. But with this one, I'm going to get you guys to add this part in as well. So we will get more into the notes and talk about what cortisol does to your body tomorrow.